Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
And it's 6:06 on this first day of August. Thanks for tuning in to O'Connor and Company. We are really grateful that you are here with us, and I think we're going to pay off your loyalty with some pretty good stuff as the morning develops. I'm Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Julie, you're our friend Ginny Gentles, who does yeoman's work at Independent Women's Forum on education issues, is going to be joining us coming up in just 30 minutes. At 7:05, Mike Summers of American Petroleum Institute. 7:35, Jim Lehman, founder of Transparency in Education. He's got some information for all of you in the Frederick County school system. And then at 8:05, Bethany Mandel, Montgomery County mom, activist, author, on a development in the in the Montgomery County school system with regard to sex and gender education. Remember, that's ground zero for the whole parents opt-out issue.
That's right.
Where you parents aren't even allowed to opt out, opt your child out of these systems that will be forced. That's all coming up. I do want to talk about some interesting trends here that we're seeing based on polls. And, listen, political polls, I tend to, say I don't put a whole lot of weight in them. I think that they give you some understanding of what's going on. But ultimately, if you want to know how people are going to vote next November, looking at a poll today isn't really telling you much, right?
Right.
Especially since they're all national polls and we don't elect presidents that way. We elect them state by state, et cetera, et cetera. That said, when I think that there's polls outside of the realm of politics with regard to people's attitudes towards certain things in our society and in our culture, I think they can be pretty revealing, especially when they sort of mesh with what we're seeing right before our eyes on a daily basis in our personal lives. And this one is incredibly disconcerting. Generation Z, Gen Z, and millennials have done a 180 with regard to their views on marriage compared to the generations before them, specifically Generation X and Boomers, the parents of that generation. At this point, according to this, it's called the Thriving Center of Psychology survey, respondents 18 to 42, when asked about marriage, 2 in 5 said it's an outdated tradition.
Wow. Almost
half of the respondents of 18 to 42 years old said marriage is an outdated tradition. 73% said it's too expensive. 85% said that it's not necessary to be married. We're not raising our children with the idea that marriage is a goal that they should be striving for. Forgive me for saying so, but that a person is not complete unless they're in a traditional monogamous relationship that hopefully will be for life. And I want to talk, I know I'm divorced and remarried, but that doesn't mean that I don't value marriage and hold it up as the absolute ideal. And as I've said to my sons in particular, you will be a better man if you are a husband.
That's the thing that's interesting to me is I'm not surprised seeing these numbers when we know that people are not going to church as much anymore. People are not feel a part of a community, and they're not as religious as they were in past years. And this is, in the Catholic Church, this is a sacrament. Yeah. Marriage is a sacrament, so we take it very seriously and we strive to achieve it. But every data point shows that marriage is good for men. You live longer, you live healthier, you make more money. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's also good for women. And for goodness sake, if you have children, staying in an intact marriage is best for the children. Yep. And so what frustrates me is I think a lot of these sort of Gen Z folks think, okay, this is, it's a religious thing. And yes, for me it is. But it also is a really good way to live in terms of you want a good life and you want to live longer and you want to live healthier. Yeah, you want to make more money.
If you want to tell me the marriage is a religious thing, then get the government completely out of marriage. Yeah. They're not. In fact, a lot of people will point to, and I think that there's some value to this argument, and I know that this is a third rail issue, but what the hell, that's what we do here. A lot of people will point to our culture and specifically our government as determined by the Supreme Court, not determined by we the people, but by the Supreme Court when they redefined marriage and said, no, it's just not just a man and a woman. It can be a man and a man. It can be two women, because you now lose the moral argument that, okay, then why isn't it 3 people? You see people now arguing for the case of a thruple.
Yeah.
And who were you to say that I can't marry 2 people or 3 people?
People
can't
are
get married
marrying
at the same
themselves.
time? Yeah. So and when you read, and people were warning about this, when you redefine it and you water it down and you change its meaning, it will seem less important to people. It will degrade the value of marriage in our society. And I think that there's an argument to say, but you can point to and say 10 years later, here's where we are.
Yeah.
So again, I said, generally speaking, I believe these polls when it matches what I see before my eyes on a micro level, and this does. Here's what I found really surprising. When you break down those Gen Zs and millennials who find marriage to be an outdated tradition, that's 2 out of 5. Here's how it breaks down between men and women, which I find shocking. 55% of women thinks that a majority of women think that marriage is an outdated proposal. It's about 42% for men. That shocks me. I thought it would be the other way around.
But this is what decades of pop culture gets you. Shows like Sex and the City, and there are many others. In nearly every movie, it's like, I don't want to get married. They even redo Jane Austen, to be like the heroine doesn't, she doesn't want any of that stuff. And there was an element of that in the traditional and the actual books. But this idea that women don't want to get married and they just want to be independent and they just want to have a career it has been jammed down our throats, down young women's throats for decades. I would say generations. Since the 70s, and that marriage isn't important and that kids aren't important and that getting a career, that's the most important thing. Yeah. So I'm not at all surprised, frankly, that we've seen that number flip.
But the irony of that, of course, is that every single data point in society shows that women are better off, they are happier, they are more fulfilled.
We talk about that, Larry.
And if they are married.
No, it's quite the opposite. Yeah. The pop culture. I'm not saying this. I'm not saying these are scholars talking about this. I'm telling you, what people see in popular culture is.
I agree.
You actually will be miserable.
Right. But the facts are the opposite.
Oh, absolutely.
The facts are and also if you just think logically, if a woman is in a relationship with a man and they don't have some love, and I know divorce is ubiquitous and that just because you're married, it doesn't mean that you're secure and it's going to last forever. Trust me. I know I'm divorced and I'm remarried. I get that. I understand that. But there is a difference between shacking up and being married.
Yes.
And for the most part, that marriage certificate tends to protect the security of women much more than it protects the security of men. Men, generally speaking, can just go off on their own anytime, and they do, by the way, and find their next relationship. It's harder for women, especially when women get older.
Yeah. But I really will say that the narrative, the message to women has not changed, at least in popular culture, has not changed since the days of Betty Friedan.
Yeah.
That if you get
Gloria
married,
Steinem, I need a man like a fish needs a bicycle.
Yes, you're going to have to do the dishes and take care of the kids and your husband. I mean, this is insane. But I do think that is the message. A lot of young women, they may grow out of that, they may mature past it, but I do think that is the prevalent narrative.
By the way, I'm guilty of it myself. I've got a almost 24-year-old daughter, got her college degree. She's out there in the professional world. And, of course, my daughter who turns 22 this week, who just graduated college, and now she's off on her career as a naval officer. That one in particular, my 22-year-old, she has a steady boyfriend now.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was like, yay, maybe they'll get married. And you're like, wait a minute.
And it's like, I'm not ready for her to get married. And it's like, so I immediately jump into this. Like, are you kidding? She just got her commission. She's an ensign. She's going to be in a submarine. She can't be married. It's like, no, actually, she should get married. Yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right. It would be great if she got married.
And this is the message I give to my children. I actually do say, it's much easier, if you find someone, at a younger age, don't
start early.
Yeah, start early.
All right. So that's the poll that I think really is of interest and something that we should be considering. Now, there's another poll about the politics of our youngsters that may surprise you, especially when it comes to young men, considering the messages they're getting right now in high school. Just wait till you hear this one in a moment. But first, at 6:15, WMAL traffic and weather every time.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
The news is brought to you by Thompson Creek Windows.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 p.m.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Now, I have a son who just graduated high school, and he went to high school in a public school in L.A. County, Southern California. So imagine the curriculum that he had.
Yeah.
He's our only kid who ended up going almost entirely after we stopped homeschooling him around third grade for him. And so then from there, for the most part, he was in public school the entire time. So, and so I talked to him. And again, because he lives with his mother in Southern California, I talk to him a lot on the phone, text with him, but I see him over the summer and I see him on holidays because that's just the way it is, right? And I go back and see him once a month because I fly out there on the weekends. I'm shocked that he politically matches exactly what this survey shows, which is 12th grade boys right now are twice as likely to identify as conservative versus liberal. This is according to a University of Michigan survey on our youth. In annual surveys over the last 3 years, roughly 1/4 of high school seniors, and I know that's not a lot, 25%, but if you think about it, generally speaking, you get out of high school, your default switch is liberal because you haven't learned anything yet. But then when you look at where the curriculum has gone for the last 10 to 20 years, I mean,
Look,
if you are conservative right now, it means you're a Trump, right?
Yeah.
Which means you're evil and racist and misogynist. So your knee jerk is always going to be, I'm not one of them, but it's actually trending more conservative.
There's a backlash. Look, we've, again, for decades now, we've seen this sort of toxic masculinity narrative. In every commercial, in every sitcom, the dad is always stupid. The mom always comes, even commercials. I mean, the dad is always the idiot. The mom sort of comes to the rescue. And I think there's a backlash against that. And conservatism is about, serving in the military or serving your country or, these ideals of chivalry and kindness and bravery. These are, and meaning in life. Boys need meaning in their life. And I think conservatism offers that to them. So I'm not surprised by this, but I think it has less to do, of course, with Trump and everything, but more to do with how boys are treated in this country and the backlash.
The boys are the problem.
Yes.
The boys are the issue. That acting masculine or acting like a boy, acting the
Quiet,
way that you're...
Or getting up and wiggling in your seat, or being aggressive on the playground, or playing with sticks, or turning a stick into a gun. It's all, oh gosh, what a terrible kid.
We got to tamp that down. We got to stop it, and you know that there's nothing wrong with it. And yes, I think that the Trump presidency and the idea that it's okay to actually, even if you're going to call me names, I'm still going to persevere and I'm going to believe what I believe because I think I'm right. That made it okay. Back when I was that age, it was the Reagan era. And again, it was like, why wouldn't I? And this is what I believe already. And now, despite what popular culture is telling me, here we've got this president who champions these ideas, articulates them beautifully, and makes them, yes, absolutely cool.
Yeah.
And so our young men are actually not coming out of our public schools or any of our school systems right now necessarily as brain dead liberals.
Well, I've told you, my children sort of joke around and say that they identify as carrots and turnips. They like to
to make jokes.
They
about
hear
it.
this stuff. I tell them though, if you're ever in DEI training, you better be careful.
Right. I say the same thing to my son.
But
He'll make jokes about that too. And I said, do not say that on a UC campus.
No, exactly.
Just don't. Just
you have to really. But I think
or say it a little less blatant.
But I love that they've reacted not with anger to this stuff, but they think it's hilarious.
They think it's hilarious.
That's a healthy reaction.
That's right. Well, that's the other thing. When you're told, don't watch this and don't listen to that, and then they tune into Tucker, it's like, wait, he makes sense. What are you
Ben
talking
Shapiro.
about? Why shouldn't I? Yes, Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a fascinating development. Now, what about patriotism, especially amongst our youth? That doesn't necessarily give us the same...
warm and fuzzies.
Warm and fuzzies. We'll give you those results in a moment. It's 6:22.
We should be proud to be American, and I certainly am. And there's sometimes it feels like there's like quite a weird like anti-American self-destructive element, especially in like the elite circles within the U.S., which seems kind of crazy to me. And at some of the colleges and high schools, they like, in a lot of cases, they're like teaching you it's bad to be an American. I'm like, this is insane.
Mm-hmm. Multi-billionaire Elon Musk on a Twitter Spaces conversation on Friday, and they often say that the most patriotic Americans often were born elsewhere, sadly, as he was. But he is reflecting and seeing exactly what these polls suggest. According to a new Gallup poll, most young people right now are not proud to be Americans. Only 18% of youth or young adults say they are extremely proud to be an American. This is of 500 U.S. adults. 18 to 34 is the group that we're talking, or excuse me, 18 to 29 is the group we're talking about here. And that makes sense considering what they hear on a daily basis in their schools.
They're getting the 1619 curriculum taught to them, that America is a racist country, that we will never, that Black people and that people of color in this country can never rise above, and that they're defined by the color of their skin. And it's, of course, this is the state of
They're going to
things.
reflect what they're taught.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what they're taught, which is part of the reason why we try to push back on what we're seeing in our public school curriculum right now. You know, if you look at the history of creating the government-funded school system that we have and the public-run school system that is supposed to be overseen and adjudicated by local school boards, the elected representatives of the people, one of the reasons we set this up was to teach kids love for our country and American patriotism. And that's, well, now we're doing the opposite. Coming up, we'll speak with Ginny Gentles about that very issue in Alexandria next.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
You know, in honor of Pee Wee Herman, I was going to say that we should have a secret word today that we have to scream every time we say this. But the only word I can come up with is traffic, and that would just get relentless. Yes. Too much. Coming up on this August 1st edition of O'Connor and Company at 7:05, we're going to speak with Mike Summers of the American Petroleum Institute. 7:35, Jim Lehman. 8:05, Bethany Mandel. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. And Julie, your colleague and a friend of this program, Ginny Gentles, joins us now. She, of course, one of the guiding lights at Independent Women's Forum, specifically as the director of the Education Freedom Center. Thank you for joining us. Oh, she's also the host of the Students Over Systems podcast.
That's right.
A very important podcast with the message that should hopefully inspire people to motivate their elected officials in every state to move them towards school choice. Ginny Gentles, always great to hear from you.
Oh, thanks so much, Larry. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Tell us about the event that you have scheduled tomorrow in Alexandria.
Well, we're really excited to be hosting an event to talk about the opportunities for expanding school choice in Virginia. The event has a long name, Breaking the Mold, Reimagining Education in a Post-COVID World. But be assured that the topic and the focus is going to be on education freedom and school choice. We'll be gathering at the ALX Community Waterfront in Old Town at 6:30, and I'm going to be moderating a great panel to talk about school choice.
What do you think the top issues are going to be that you're going to address, especially considering it appears as though what you've sort of laid out there as a brief overview is in line with what Governor Youngkin is now attempting to do statewide?
Well, I appreciate Governor Youngkin's support for what he calls lab schools. And in fact, the State Board of Education voted to support the first lab school, which would be sponsored by VCU. And it's going to be like a high school focused on computer science, I think. But that's not enough. One lab school in one place in a giant state like Virginia is not going to transform the system and is not going to provide sufficient options for parents and students who want something else. So we're going to talk about what's been going on in other states, and it's quite impressive. Close to 20 states have expanded or created school choice programs this year. Some are now universal. Florida, Arizona, West Virginia, Indiana's near universal. These are states where parents, if they want an option, if they want an alternative for their child, they can have it. And that's what we want to learn more about when we talk on Wednesday. What are these other states doing? What can Virginia learn from that? Nathan Kaneen from the American Federation for Children will be sharing that information. And then CJ Saylor from Americans for Prosperity will talk about what's been tried in Virginia, what's worked and what hasn't worked, and what we need to do. We also have Christian Barnard from the Reason Foundation, who can talk about options like open enrollment, which is just plain old public school choice. If you live in one district, you can go to school in another district if your state has a robust open enrollment program.
Ginny, I'm so glad you're doing this in Alexandria, Virginia. As you know, Alexandria City Public Schools, as well as Fairfax and other school districts in the Northern Virginia area, have put out actual statements saying that they will not comply or put in place Youngkin's model policies. This, to me, is yet more reason that we need school choice, because there are plenty of parents out there who are trapped in these public schools. And with this news, many of them are going to be worried about sending their kids to these schools where secrets are kept, where boys can walk into the women's and girls' bathrooms and locker rooms. So how is the governor sort of, do you think he's aware of this and might, I don't know, accelerate the effort to get school choice moving in Virginia because of the refusal of these districts to
I appreciate you. I appreciate you making that connection. I went to go speak to the Virginia State Board of Education last week just to express support for the model policies. When Governor Youngkin does the right thing, and when the Virginia Department of Education does the right thing, I think that we should acknowledge that. And one of the things that I put in my written remarks is that I'm not going to return to the Arlington public schools. I don't trust the public schools in my area to educate my children and to not keep secrets from me. They've made it really clear in their opposition to these model policies that they intend to keep secrets from parents, that they intend to push children down these psychosocial transitions that lead to medical transitioning, that lead to lifelong harm. And so I'm sure I'm not alone. I hope that the folks in Richmond can make that connection that you were saying there, that the more that these Northern Virginia in particular boards oppose the model policies, the more families are going to need options. They're going to need school choice. They're going to need the freedom to leave and find a choice that's safe and supportive and collaborative and prioritizes the physical and emotional needs of vulnerable students.
It's interesting, Ginny. I think when the school choice movement began, it was so that parents could get a better, higher quality education for their kids in a private school, because the curriculum and the education results from the public schools are just not measuring up. But now it seems like the priority is less about the actual, reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's about all the other stuff that's been inflicted in either the politically biased and corrupting influence of the curriculum that doesn't have a whole lot to do with education. It has a lot to do with social engineering, or, of course, as we've mentioned, all of the policies with regard to gender and sexuality.
Well, and let's not forget technology. I sat with another mother at a softball game this spring, and she'd say, "What I'd do for a pencil." She's so tired of the Northern Virginia boards and their obsessions with iPads and Chromebooks and technology. Her child never writes.
Right.
Never physically writes.
That's hilarious.
And I kind of quietly was like, well, my child never doesn't write at her little faith-based private school. Like, it's out there. They just don't know. I think parents don't realize that those pencils, those books, those textbooks, the transparency, everything that you want from a school, it's out there. It's just you need to be researching the options, and then for families who can't afford it, they need access to school choice programs so that they can take advantage of them.
So, Ginny, I want you to say again where this event is. I hope to go and support the CU and support this event. So give us again the details on when and where this is.
Well, there's an Eventbrite page, and the name of the page, and that's why I'm telling you the whole long name of the event, Breaking the Mold, Reimagining Education in a Post-COVID World. Go there. It has all the details, and you can RSVP. But it's at a place called ALX Community Waterfront, which apparently is like a co-working kind of space that looks really cool. So 6:30 on Wednesday.
And that's 201. It's 201 North Union Street.
Great. In
Yes,
Alexandria.
201 North Union in Alexandria.
Ginny, thanks for all you do. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ginny.
Thank you.
6:45. It is 6:50 right here on O'Connor and Company. So you saw the U.S. women's soccer team overnight. If you're just tuning in, they played to a 0-0 tie against Portugal, which is an underwhelming performance. But they did barely make it out of this first round now, so they will make it into the tournament play or the elimination round now. But as usual, most people are not talking about the soccer right now. They're talking about their refusal to sing the national anthem. And we were watching last night because the games are on during our show, right?
Yeah.
So yesterday, Canada and Australia played, and we were seeing on the television the Canadian team full-throated, robustly singing, smiling, and loving their anthem and loving their country. Yeah. And it was striking to see the U.S. team just sort of, they were just focused on the game. They were really, Megyn Kelly had NBA star Jonathan Isaac, who we've had on the program, great guy, out of the Orlando Magic, on to talk about that.
The women's soccer team is a different story. They're about to take a hit. They are embarrassing us. That's what I think, Jonathan. They're embarrassing us. Time after time after time. First, they go up against the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese sing their anthem loud and proud. There are women who could barely find a mumble. Maybe 2 or 3 tried to find a mumble of a few of our lyrics, and at least half didn't even have their hands on their heart. Now they go out again against, it was the Dutch, right? And the Dutch are singing it loud and singing it proud. Their anthem, once again, there's our ladies phoning it in. They could barely spare a word. They don't care to represent the United States with any sort of pride. And
all right, so that's Megyn Kelly's take. Here's Jonathan Isaac.
What do you make of this?
Well, I do think it sucks. I think it is telling about where we are as a country. And kind of the first thing that comes to my mind is, the people who are playing for these other countries, their countries that they live in aren't perfect. And no country is. And if you would compare some of the things that go on in our country and some of the things that go on in these other countries, you would think that it would be the other way around, because of, how, great the U.S. is overall. Obviously, the U.S. has had downfalls and, a history that isn't spectacular.
You'll remember Jonathan Isaac is one of the players who would not take a knee from the NBA. He was the sole player who would stand while all of his teammates took a knee during the national anthem during the BLM protests of 2020. He's a good man. But I guess at this point with the women's soccer team, we should just be grateful they're not taking knees. It's like it's a step forward, I suppose, I guess. I don't know.
No one watches, so there's that. There's that. But, we talked earlier about the lack of patriotism and women not wanting to get married and sort of being, this sort of like cold, miserable beings. And I brought up what the images that people see in pop culture, particularly when it comes to patriotism. This is what they see. They see some of the most talented sports figures in America, either kneeling or looking angry with their arms crossed and not muttering a word of the anthem. That has an impact on young minds. Yeah. And then they go to school and they're taught that America is a horrible country and our founding fathers were all racist and that really the founding of the nation was based on slavery. Of course you're not going to. Yeah. You're
right. We're holding these women up as heroes and icons and the representative of what all the young girls in America should be. And this is and you're right. It's not just lack of love for the country. It's outright hostility toward the country. And I think that's something that most of us can't tolerate. It is 6:53. Hey, wait, while